Welcome to Psychology, the Daf. We are in Gemara Pesachim, Daf Nun Zayin. And today we're going to talk about the painful topic of when children do not follow in the footsteps of their parents. Our Gemara, toward the bottom of Amud Aleph, discusses the sins of the sons of Eli, Kohanim, who served right at the beginning of Shmuel Hanavi's ascendancy. Now, the Gemara in Shabbos on Nun Hey Amud Beis says that the sons of Eli did not sin in committing adultery, although the literal text does seem to indicate that. Rashi does say over there in the Gemara that they indeed did sin. They sinned in regard to inappropriately confiscating sacrificial meats that was not their due. Now, the sons of Eli and their descendants were cursed with shortened lifespans. This was Shmuel's first prophecy, and he had to deliver the news to Eli that this was to occur due to his son's misdeeds. Ironically, Shmuel's own sons did not follow in their father's virtuous footsteps as well. Though not as corrupt as Eli's son, you can look at Shmuel Aleph, Perek, Ches, and the commentaries. But this is a good time for us to meditate on the challenges of having children who do not follow in their parents' footsteps. Now, of course, it behooves all parents who experience difficulty with their children to reflect and understand, where did this come from? What is there something that I did wrong as a parent? And I think that that's very worthy. And of course, there's much to learn, and perhaps even situations that we can still repair if we reflect on that. However, it's also important to be comforted with the idea that clearly this is a pattern that is very deep in the Derech HaOlam. Children do not always turn out like their parents, and do not always turn out as virtuous as their parents, and certainly do not necessarily follow their parents' expectations. We can't miss the fact that all the avos in the Torah struggled with their children, who not all of them followed in their virtuous paths. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Shvatim, Yaakov and Esav, Ishmael and Yitzchak. And we see David HaMelech, he had two sons, Adoniah and Avshalom, that did not follow in their footsteps. Avshalom wanted to kill David more than once. There was a lot going on, and it is a normal part of the world for us to live with. The problem is that when you belong to a community who has a very high value on conformity, the amount of shame that other members will experience if their children don't conform can be very hard to bear. Now, this is not necessarily a criticism, it's just an admission of the reality of what we live in. We live in a community where we are held liable for the actions of our children and our relatives, sometimes justly, probably most of the time unjustly. There's even a Gemara in the end of Maseches Sukkah that a whole family line amongst the Kohanim were stripped of certain privileges because one of their children had some rather critical things to say about the Beis Hamikdash and became an apostate. Now, in that Gemara, the Gemara says explicitly that that child wouldn't have turned out that way if not for hearing cynical rhetoric from the parents. So, this is a pattern that goes on, that exists, and at times may be true, but we also need to know that it continues to go on, and it's a part of life. Even something as innocuous as a sports team, you have to belong to that group. From my youth, I remember what would happen to a Red Sox fan who would show up at a Yankees game with Red Sox team emblems on his hat and on his T-shirt. The results were not good. Every social group, from the most trivial to the most major, will enforce its norms through some kind of aggression or coercion, whether it's shaming or even physical violence. So, as parents or family members of people that don't necessarily follow in the traditional path, it is really painful for us to realize and to accept that that's a part of the world. And it's not only us, but God's children also do not follow in his footsteps. You can't even start Sefer Bereshis without already the sins of Adam and Chava, Cain and Hevel coming up. But even more so, there's a fascinating Bereshis Rabbah chapter 5, or you can see it in Rashi on Bereshis, Pasuk Yud Aleph, Perak Aleph, where even the trees did not listen to God. The trees were supposed to taste like the fruit. Even the branches and the wood of the tree were supposed to have some type of taste that was similar to the fruit. And they did not obey God. So what we must accept, this unmistakable conclusion and pattern of the universe, and that is that our most beloved projects, our hopes and our dreams, our children and our creations, they just don't always work out the way we plan.